Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my booktube channel. Today I'm going to tell you about 3 Beauty and the Beast retelling recommendations. So first of all, I just love Beauty and the Beast. I've read so many retellings this year so far. I've read 3 and those are the 3 I'll be talking to you about, but there are many others that I've read before. One of my favorites is A Curse So Dark and Lonely. It's a pretty recent one. And I don't even remember the titles of the others, but rest assured, I have read many, whether they're fanfictions or I buy them as ebooks from Amazon. But I just love the story. It's a classic and just, it's so much better than a princess randomly falling in love with a prince, you know? Or like a Snow White story where it's kind of love at first sight and he kisses her and she wakes up. Or Cinderella, where again, it's like they meet one time at this ball and then he wants to marry her. There's just not a lot of relationship building, but as compared to Beauty and the Beast, there's a lot of character arc and relationship building going on. So I just love the story and the theme of the story about loving someone regardless of their appearance. And the plot inherently has room for lots of romantic conflict and tension, just because she's obviously his prisoner in this castle, but he needs her to break this curse. With that said, let's get into our 3 Beauty and the Beast retellings. The first, here we go, is As Old as Time by Liz Braswell. So as you can see, this is a Disney book, and with each of these books, you obviously know the basic plot for the most part, but I'm going to tell you what's unique about each Beauty and the Beast retelling. So for this book, it's by Disney, and it took me a long time to actually read it. I had a gap year, and then I've had 2 years in college, so I've had this book for 3 years because my friend bought this for me as a high school graduation present. And it's because I would like skim in the middle of the book and find a scene that was verbatim, line by line, like the Disney animated movie. And I love the Disney animated movie, but I don't just want to read a book version of that. I want to read something unique. So what makes this one unique is it says, what if Belle's mother cursed the beast? And you'd think, well, what does that really change about the story? And for the first half of the story, honestly, it doesn't. For the first half, a lot of it switches between one chapter that tells about Belle's father and her mother, the Enchantress, whose name is Rosalind, and how they meet and the things she does as an enchantress. And then the next chapter will be Belle's part of the story. And like I said, for the first half, it's almost word for word in some scenes like the Disney movie, which is a little tedious, honestly. But at the second half of the story, things get kind of interesting. Because what happens is that Belle, she wanders into the Beast room in the Forbidden West Wing, right? Just like the Disney movie. But then she picks up the rose and it disintegrates. And instead of breaking the curse, because the rose is now destroyed, she's forever cursed the Beast in this form and cursed the castle. Like, there's no way that they can undo the curse now. So the rest of the story is them trying to find her mother, the Enchantress, who actually has been locked away in this mental institution, which there is a lot more going on there, but I don't want to spoil too much. So yeah, her mother has been locked away in this mental institution, which is why she's missing from Belle's life, and this happened shortly after she cursed the Beast. So what makes this story really, really different, aside from her mother being the Enchantress, is that to save Belle at one point in the story, the Beast actually has to go up to the townspeople and ask them for help. So that was very, very different toward the climax of the story. And then at the end of the story, spoiler alert, so just like skip forward about half a minute if you don't want to know the end. But the Beast actually does not turn back into a human at the end of the story. He retains his beast-like form, and at first I was kind of off-put by this, but then the story kind of ends on a hopeful note in that they're going to go and find the other magic-type people and enchanters and enchantresses, and her mother can't undo the beast curse because at the mental institution they've been doing experiments on her and they've drained her of pretty much all of her magic. So she has enough to change the people of the castle back, but not enough to change the Beast back into a human, so the Beast chooses to turn the servants back into humans rather than himself. So at the end of the book, the Beast and Belle decide to go on this adventure where they find a group of people who can possibly turn the Beast back. And so that's the summary of this story. So it was pretty interesting, like I said. first part was pretty tedious. It was kind of interesting reading about her parents, but it also felt like when you read Beauty and the Beast, you don't really read to learn about her parents, so it kind of felt like flipping between either the Disney movie, like a Disney movie script, or the backstory of her parents. So again, wasn't that interested in the first part, but the second part was definitely interesting, and I got through this whole thing pretty much in a day, which is pretty good, because I had school on that day and I was doing a bunch of other things, yet I still managed to get through it. I think it was actually the same day that I took my accounting exam, so probably not the best idea, but I made an A on the accounting exam, so it's fine. It worked out. So the next Beauty and the Beast retelling is Beauty by Robin McKinley, and this one was actually recommended to me by a friend. My friend told me that it was a bit more, how did she put it? More formal and kind of, I want to say archaic, old themed. Like the language really isn't that old. Nothing like Jane Austen or Charles Dickens. But you can tell it's definitely not a modern YA book just because of some of the vocabulary they use that's a bit more flowery or bigger than normal. So it's a bit more antiquated. The style's just kind of a bit older in a way, just with the wording. More classic, I guess. More of a classic vibe. So what made this unique was that this one also had a very, very slow start. My gosh. It took me 25% of the book until it reached the part where her dad had given her the flower and where she had to exchange her life for her father's. Typically that part of Beauty and the Beast that's almost at the very, very beginning, right? Like in the Disney movie, for example, we have some setup with her in the town, and then almost right after that we have her father picking the rose and she trades her life for his, and then she's the Beast prisoner. In this case, this happens 25% of the way through the book. Yeah, it just takes a while, and it is kind of interesting because it goes through a lot of their backstory, which, again, not a huge fan of backstory, but it wasn't completely dull. In the backstory, Belle's father is actually very rich. He's this merchant, but then he loses everything, so they move to this distant place in the country near this enchanted forest, and there are rumors about there's this terrible beast somewhere in the enchanted forest. And so what happens is her father goes on this long journey and he returns with this magic rose. And he tells her how the only reason he was allowed to bring her this rose was if he returns back and becomes the Beast prisoner. And he said the only way he won't become the Beast prisoner forever is if they trade places, and Belle, or Beauty, her name is Beauty in this book. And Beauty's actually her nickname because her original name is Honor, interestingly enough, also different. So of course she has the option of trading places with him, but her father won't allow that. He says that he'll go instead, but Beauty, she refuses. She says that she is absolutely going to trade her life for his, how like her family needs him more. And it's very interesting because in this story Beauty is really a tomboy. The men kind of treat her like one of them, and she has this huge horse that can pull up these stumps that no one else can because he was bred from war horses or whatever, so to celebrate, the men like give her beers and stuff. That's kind of interesting. So she's really kind of tomboyish, and she doesn't do a lot of the more womanly things that her sisters do. She has two older sisters that are just gorgeous, and Beauty is much more plain compared to them. So her nickname is kind of ironic. So this was, again, very unique in that, first of all, she's plain, or at least perceives herself as plain, and then secondly, that she's really kind of a tomboy, because in the other ones, she's more of like sweet and gentle and very feminine. So this was unique in that regard. So she goes to the Beast Castle, and then instead of being animated objects, the servants were just, they were kind of in another realm, and they were kind of invisible, so sometimes she could hear their voices. And some aspects of this Beauty and the Beast story were very similar to other retellings I've read. At certain points I'm like, have I read this book before? But then there are other parts that are very different, and I remembered like, no, I have not read this book before. For example, the Beast is actually pretty old. He ages he's about 20 when he's cursed, and he ages another 20 years, so he ends up being 40. And at first I thought that he was just like older as a beast, because it says that he has some gray in his fur, but then he turns back to a human and he still has some gray in his hair, and he's 40 years old, and I'm like, well, okay, I mean, I guess they do that in Jane Eyre, so it's fine. And then something else is that this beast is very mild-mannered and gentle, because he's been in this place for about 200 years, so he's had a lot of time to think and develop and grow up. So he's much more mild-mannered and civil, and he's really good at talking to Beauty and just listening to her, and she finds that she really enjoys speaking to him in general. So that was different, because in other versions the beast is sometimes still struggling with temper issues or has these kind of beast-like outbursts, and this beast didn't really have that. He was, like I said, much more mild-mannered and civil and grown up, which makes sense because he's older. The climax was a bit rushed. I didn't really realize it was the climax, so maybe that's why. But the beast is dying, so she goes back, and the climax is really just her struggling to get back through this forest, because the forest, as the curse fully takes hold of it, she gets lost a lot, and she has trouble reaching there. And then she comes and she saves him, and he turns into a human, and that's kind of it. So the middle part of the book was really well developed. The beginning was a bit slow, and then the climax, I felt like it was a bit rushed, just for my taste personally. But I did really enjoy it. I was definitely enraptured, and it was a very engaging story. Finally, we have Beauty and the Beast by Jenni James. I've read some of Jenni James' other books, primarily her Jane Austen retellings, which I love. Oh my gosh, I think it's Persuaded that she wrote. It's like one of my favorites ever. I need to reread that. Reading it just makes me happy. It's the sweetest romance ever. This one is unique in that it's actually a really short read. If you look on the estimated time for Kindle, it's about 2 hours. And what's interesting is that he's not completely a beast. This is one of those where he is human and has a phase where he turns into a beast, kind of like in A Curse So Dark and Lonely, except he turns into a beast every single night, and the beast that he is a giant wolf. So it's not really a super ugly beast. He thinks it's ugly because it's ugly compared to his normal form, but he's actually handsome for a wolf, as it mentions in this story. What's also interesting is that Beauty and the Beast actually know each other before they start really developing a relationship and falling in love. So the Beast is this prince, and of course he lives out his days as a normal prince does, and then during the night he turns into this wolf. Honestly, it's kind of a Beauty and the Beast werewolf type thing, I guess. So before he was cursed and turned into the wolf at night, he knew this girl. I believe her name is Stella. And he was just kind of a jerk to her. He'd see her helping other people, and he's like, people don't want your help. They don't want you in their business. You know, you're just like obnoxious and you're ugly. He was just really rude, of course, because he was a beast inwardly. And then he was cursed, and the book starts off with this girl expecting to be proposed to by this guy, but he actually ends up telling her that he's been seeing another woman and that they're engaged, which breaks her heart, and so automatically the prince starts to sympathize with her, and she kind of becomes the laughingstock of this whole village, because her family even went so far as to start this engagement ball. And actually her mother is present in this book, which is something else that's different. So they plan this engagement ball, but then they have to cancel it because she's not engaged, and so the prince wants to help her with her reputation, so that he kind of stages this engagement with her, except he doesn't really have to fake feelings for her because he really starts to admire her. And so they have this one place by the creek that they meet every evening, and there's this evil cousin of the prince's that tries to kind of interfere in their relationship, but he's kind of the main villain. And so she trusts this wolf, and she doesn't realize the wolf is the prince. And so the wolf tells her to trust the prince, and that the prince can be trusted, and that he is a mutual friend of both the prince's and hers. So that's also kind of different in that she doesn't realize that the beast and then his human counterpart are the same person. So eventually the evil cousin tells her that the prince has killed the wolf, and what makes it interesting is that the prince hasn't killed the wolf. It's because she tells him that she loves him, but she runs away before he can say anything back or before she can see his transformation. So now he can't turn back into the wolf anymore. So that's what the climax has to do with, and that, like, she thinks that he's killed the wolf, but actually he is the wolf but can't turn back into him anymore because the curse has been broken. So overall, it was a really, really sweet short read. I said there were some parts in the other books that were tedious, and with this book, I mean, it's short enough that there was nothing that was tedious. It was just a really light read, nothing too in-depth. I know young adult fantasy books nowadays tend to have really complex plots, and they tend to be longer. Again, this was a shorter book, light read, but also very, very enjoyable. There wasn't anything that really lagged. So there's not really anything bad about this book. It honestly just kind of depends what you're in the mood for. Well, there you guys have 3 Beauty and the Beast retellings. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe, because I post 1 bookish or writing related video a week. Even though, between me and you, I've kind of been inconsistent for the past 3 weeks. But I'm working on it. Sometimes stuff just happens and life gets in the way even during quarantine, believe it or not. And as always, I'd love to hear from you guys. In the comments, let me know some of your favorite fairy tale retellings. And let me know also, what is your favorite fairy tale that you'd like to be retold, if that makes sense. So, let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!